I never thought waiting for an Uber could feel like the most nerve-wracking part of my night. But there we were, standing on that chilly sidewalk under a flickering street lamp, both of us awkwardly shifting from foot to foot, pretending the cold wasn't creeping through our thin jackets. I'd been out with friends earlier, but somehow ended up here, alone with him. Jamie, the guy I'd been crushing on for way too long. It wasn't like we'd planned this. We'd just bumped into each other by chance a few minutes earlier, right outside a dive bar that was closing up. I was halfway through scrolling on my phone, trying to figure out if I had any missed texts, when I heard him call my name like it was the most casual thing in the world. Except it wasn't at all. My heart jumped so hard I'm pretty sure the entire street heard it. "Hey," he said, flashing that easy grin that always makes me forget how to speak properly. Jamie's got this kind of laid-back vibe, like nothing really rattles him, and his eyes have this way of catching the light so that you can't help but get lost in them. He's the kind of guy who laughs with his whole face, dimples and all, and somehow makes the whole world feel a little less crappy just by being around. We'd met a few times before, at friends, parties, that one awkward group hike where I almost fell off a trail, and a couple of random city events. But it was always brief hellos and forced smiles. Tonight, though, was different. Maybe it was the way he leaned against the brick wall, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, or the way his hair was tousled just enough to look effortlessly cool. Whatever it was, it made me want to say something clever, but all I managed was, "Hey, Jamie, didn't expect to see you here." He shrugged, the kind of shrug that says, "Yeah, life's weird, but also feels like an invitation." "Same, just grabbing an Uber home." "What about you?" "Yeah, same. Lame. I know." I was trying not to stare, but it's hard not to when the guy's right there, 2 feet away, and the sidewalk feels like the only thing keeping me from just blurting out how long I've been wanting to ask him out. We fell into this sort of easy silence, the kind that isn't uncomfortable but charged with all the things neither of us was saying. The street was mostly empty except for a few late-night cars passing by, the occasional shout from somewhere down the block, and the faint hum of the city that never really sleeps. After a few minutes, Jamie pulled out his phone and started tapping away, probably checking the Uber ETA like I was. That's when I noticed his hands. Long fingers, a little rough from what I imagined was some kind of manual work, or maybe just a habit of fiddling with stuff. It's weird how those little details stick with you. "Hey," he suddenly said, looking up with a half smile. "You want to walk with me to the corner? I think the Uber's coming from that direction." My heart did this stupid flip-flop. Walking together? Just the two of us? It sounded harmless, but my brain was already spiraling through all the possible scenarios. What if I say something dumb? What if he thinks I'm weird? What if the Uber shows up and it all ends awkwardly? But I nodded, because honestly, I couldn't think of a better way to spend the next few minutes. We started walking side by side, slow enough that our shoulders almost brushed but not quite. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the city smelled like rain even though it hadn't rained yet, that weird clean smell that always makes me a little nostalgic. Then, just as the Uber's headlights appeared around the corner, Jamie paused, turned toward me, and said something so unexpected it made my breath catch. "You know, I've been wanting to do this all night." Before I could ask what he meant, he leaned in and kissed me, and that's when the night truly changed. The kiss wasn't some fireworks exploding in my chest moment like you see in the movies. It was quieter, softer, like a secret shared between two people who've been waiting alone. Jamie's lips were warm and gentle against mine, and for a second, everything else, the cold, the street, the waiting, just disappeared. When we pulled away, neither of us said anything right away. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought it might actually echo against the brick walls lining the sidewalk. I glanced at him, half expecting to see some kind of regret or awkwardness, but no. He was just watching me with those same steady eyes, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Wow," I said, because honestly, that was the only word that came to mind. He laughed, low, and a little breathless. "Yeah, me too." The Uber pulled up then, a sleek black car slowing to a stop right in front of us. The driver glanced over, probably wondering why two guys were standing out here looking like they'd just survived some kind of emotional storm. Jamie reached out, grabbed my hand, just a quick squeeze, but it was enough to send a jolt straight up my arm. "Get in with me?" he asked. My brain screamed that this was crazy, that we'd barely even talked tonight, but my heart didn't care. It was already nodding before I could argue. We slid into the back seat side by side, the small space instantly feeling like its own little world away from the city noise and freezing air. Jamie wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned in just a little, feeling that warm, familiar heat where his skin met mine. So, he said, voice low and easy, "What have I done? Scared you off on our first real hangout?" I smiled, shaking my head. "No way. You caught me totally off guard, but in a good way." He grinned. "Good, because I was starting to think you'd punch me or run." "Neither," I said, and I meant it. Honestly, I've been kicking myself for not doing something like this first. Jamie's eyes flicked to mine, curious. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, feeling a little shy all of a sudden. "I guess I just never knew if you felt the same. I've liked you for a while, but I didn't want to mess up the vibe we had." He nodded like he understood, then squeezed my hand again. I was thinking the same thing. The rest of the ride passed in this easy rhythm. Small talk about work, favorite bands, a ridiculous mutual dislike for kale smoothies, until the Uber driver announced we'd arrived at Jamie's place. Neither of us wanted to break the moment, so we lingered in the car for a beat longer than necessary, faces close but not quite touching. When we finally stepped out, the cold hit us again, sharper this time. Jamie fumbled with his keys, his fingers trembling just slightly, which made me smile. "Nervous?" I teased. "Maybe a little," he admitted, unlocking the door and pulling me in right behind him. His apartment was cozy, warm yellow lights casting soft shadows, books stacked on a coffee table, a couple of plants thriving in the corners. It felt like a space someone had carefully made their own, and suddenly I wanted to know every detail about it. Jamie kicked off his shoes and slid onto the couch, patting the spot next to him. I sat down, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, like trying to read the next page in a book neither of us had dared open before. "So," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat, "what happens now?" He grinned, eyes sparkling. "Whatever we want." That was the moment I realized how long I'd been waiting for this. Not just the kiss or the chance to hold his hand, but the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. We spent the next hour talking, really talking, for once dropping the polite small talk and sharing the things we usually kept hidden. Jamie told me about his job as a graphic designer, how he'd moved to the city 2 years ago, chasing a dream he wasn't even sure he believed in anymore. I told him about my own struggles with feeling stuck, like life was passing me by while I stood frozen in place. Somewhere between stories and laughter, the nervousness melted away, replaced by this quiet connection that felt both thrilling and terrifying. At one point, Jamie reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead, his fingers lingering a second longer than necessary. I caught my breath and leaned into the touch, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the heater humming in the background. "Hey," he said softly, "I'm really glad you're here." "Me too," I whispered back. When I finally left that night, it was with a smile I couldn't wipe off and a heart pounding with possibilities. Standing on the sidewalk again, waiting for the Uber to take me home, I realized that sometimes the scariest moments lead to the most unforgettable ones. And as I watched Jamie disappear behind his door, I knew this was just the beginning. The next few days felt like I was walking around in slow motion, caught somewhere between disbelief and hope. I kept replaying that moment in Jamie's apartment over and over. How his hand felt warm in mine, how his smile made everything else fade away. It was weird because normally I'd be a mess, second-guessing every step or word, but this felt different. Real. Like maybe I wasn't completely out of my depth. We texted the next morning, which was a relief. Nothing heavy, just, "Hey," and "How's your day?" But each message felt like a lifeline, a way to hold on to whatever this was starting to be. By the end of the day, we were trading memes and movie recommendations, and I caught myself grinning at my phone like an idiot. Then, a few days later, Jamie invited me out for coffee. We met at this tiny cafe, tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Perfectly unpretentious, the kind of place where the baristas know your name after a couple visits. Jamie was already there when I got in, sitting by the window with his hoodie half-zipped and that same easy smile waiting for me. "Hey," he said, waving me over. "Hey," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him, trying not to stare too hard at the way the sunlight hit his face just right. We ordered lattes, vanilla for me, black coffee for him, and sat there talking for hours. Not just the usual getting to know you stuff, but the kind of conversations that scratch beneath the surface. Like, go out on a real date? I felt like I'd just won the lottery. Definitely. We made plans for the weekend, dinner, and a movie, and I left the cafe feeling like my head was full of stars. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, my mind racing with all the possibilities. Was this the start of something amazing? Or was I setting myself up to get hurt? But then I thought about Jamie's smile, the way he held my hand, the way he made me feel seen, and I decided I was ready to find out. When Saturday came, I dressed in my favorite shirt, the one I always save for something special, and headed out to meet him. Jamie was waiting outside the restaurant when I got there, looking effortlessly handsome in a denim jacket and that crooked smile that never failed to shake me up. We spent the evening eating way too much food, sharing stories, and stealing glances across the table. The conversation flowed easily, and the laughter came naturally. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't pretending or performing. I was just me. After dinner, we walked to the nearby theater, the city lights casting a warm glow around us. Jamie slipped his hand into mine, and my heart did that stupid flip-flop again. The movie was a rom-com, corny, predictable, and exactly what we needed. Halfway through, Jamie leaned over and whispered, "I'm really glad we did this." "Me too," I whispered back. When the credits rolled, we stepped out into the cool night air. Jamie pulled me close, his hand sliding to the back of my neck, and before I could even think, he kissed me again. This time, it was deeper, more certain, like we were both ready to stop holding back. When we finally parted, the street was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Jamie smiled, eyes shining. "So," he said, "what now?" I grinned, feeling more alive than I had in months. "Now, we see where this goes." He squeezed my hand, and we started walking, side by side, into whatever came next. And honestly, I couldn't wait. The days that followed our date felt like I was walking on a cloud, but also like I was trying not to trip over my own feet. Jamie and I slipped into this easy rhythm, texting throughout the day, sending each other dumb selfies and making plans for little things, like grabbing lunch or checking out a new art exhibit downtown. It wasn't some whirlwind romance from a movie. It was just two guys figuring out how to be around each other without all the usual awkwardness. One Thursday night, Jamie invited me over to his place again. This time, I knew what to expect. Or so I thought. I got there just as the sun was setting, casting these soft orange tones through his apartment windows. He greeted me with that same half smile that always made me feel like I was the only person in the room. "Hey," he said, pulling me into a hug. His jacket was still on, but I could feel the warmth of him through the thin fabric. "Hey," I replied, resting my head against his shoulder for a second longer than I expected. We settled onto his couch, and Jamie pulled a blanket over us like he'd done it 100 times before. The soft glow of the lamp made everything feel cozy, and I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in a long time. "So," he said, reaching for the remote, "I thought we could watch something stupid." "You pick?" I smiled. "How about that old horror flick you mentioned last week? The one you said was so bad it's good." He laughed, eyes lighting up. "Perfect! I was hoping you'd say that." As the movie started, Jamie scooted closer, his arm draping over my shoulders. I leaned into him, feeling that familiar comfort, the way his presence filled the space without words. Halfway through, there was a particularly cheesy jump scare, and I let out this ridiculous yelp. Jamie laughed, squeezing my side. "Dork," he teased, grinning, a proud one. I shot back, laughing too. After the movie ended, we stayed curled up together on the couch, the silence between us feeling warm, not empty. Then Jamie turned to me and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," I said, heart suddenly a little heavier. He took a deep breath, fiddling with the hem of his sleeve. "Have you ever been, I don't know, scared to be with someone? Like, really scared?" I nodded, the weight of his question hitting me harder than I expected. "Yeah, more times than I can count." He looked at me then, eyes searching, vulnerable. "Because I want this to be real, but I'm afraid of getting hurt. I don't want to mess this up. I swallowed, reaching out to brush a hand over his. Jamie, no one gets through this life without a few scars, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. We figure it out. Together. He smiled then, really smiled, the kind that reaches the eyes and makes you believe that maybe, just maybe, everything's gonna be okay. We stayed up talking until late, sharing fears and hopes and all the messy stuff we usually hide. It felt like the most honest conversation I'd had in years. A week later, things took a different turn. I was at work, buried under emails and deadlines, when my phone buzzed. It was Jamie. Can you meet me? Need to talk. My stomach turned. Nothing about that message screamed casual. I texted back, yeah, of course. We agreed to meet at a quiet park near his apartment. When I got there, Jamie was already sitting on a bench, staring out at the pond with this thoughtful look on his face. Hey, I said softly, sitting down next to him. He turned to me, eyes serious but gentle. I've been thinking a lot about us, about how quickly things have moved, and I don't want to rush anything, but I'm falling for you. Hard. My heart jumped, but there was a flicker of worry underneath. I feel the same way. Jamie nodded. Good, because I'm scared too, scared this might not work, but also scared not to try. I reached out and took his hand in mine. We're in this together. Scared or not, he smiled, squeezing my hand back. That moment, right there on that bench, with the city humming around us, felt like a turning point, like we'd stepped off the edge of uncertainty and into something real. Over the next few weeks, we kept peeling back layers, talking about families, past relationships, what we wanted from life. Jamie told me about the times he'd hidden who he was, the nights he'd felt alone even surrounded by people. And I shared my own stories, the times I'd felt invisible, the moments I'd convinced myself I wasn't enough. It wasn't always easy. There were days when doubts crept in, when we stumbled over words or let fears get the better of us. But every time, we came back to each other. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Jamie invited me over for brunch. He cooked pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream, which he claimed was his secret talent. We laughed over burnt edges and spilled coffee, the kind of comfortable chaos that feels like home. Afterward, we sprawled on his couch, Jamie's head resting on my chest. I traced circles on his arm and felt a sense of peace I hadn't known I was missing. Do you think this is what people call being in love? I asked quietly. Jamie looked up, eyes soft. I think it's whatever we make it. And right now, it feels pretty damn good. I smiled, leaning down to kiss his forehead. That night, as I walked home under the city lights, I realized something important. Real love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about the quiet ones, the messy ones, the ones where you choose someone again and again, despite the fear. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to do just that. Even after all those nights wrapped up in blankets and conversations that stretched past 2 a.m., there were still moments when doubt crept in, like an unwelcome shadow sneaking around the edges of everything we'd built together. I'd catch myself wondering if this was just a beautiful, fragile bubble waiting to pop, or if, maybe, this time, it could actually last. One such moment came about 2 months in. Jamie and I were sitting on his balcony, the city sprawled beneath us like a glittering labyrinth. The summer breeze was soft, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the occasional shout from late-night revelers. I was nursing a beer, trying to ignore the knot twisting in my stomach. We'd been arguing earlier about something stupid, as most arguments tend to be, and even though it was over, the silence between us was heavy, like a thick fog settling in. Jamie broke it first, his voice quiet. Do you ever think about the future? Like, what it looks like for us? I sighed, setting the bottle down on the small table. All the time, but honestly, the future scares me. He nodded, eyes searching mine. Same. I mean, it feels amazing now, but what if it doesn't stay that way? What if it all falls apart? I reached for his hand, fingers intertwining automatically. I think about that too, but I also think that if we don't try, we'll never know. He smiled, but it was tinged with something fragile. Yeah. I guess love isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared together. We sat there for a while, hands clasped, watching the city lights blink alive as night deepened. That vulnerability, that honesty, it was what made me fall even harder for him. A couple of weeks later, Jamie surprised me with tickets to a jazz club downtown. He knew I loved live music, and though he wasn't exactly a jazz enthusiast, he said he wanted to experience it with me. We arrived early, the place dimly lit and buzzing with anticipation. The smooth notes of the saxophone floated through the air, wrapping around us like a warm embrace. Jamie slid his hand into mine across the small table, and I felt a surge of gratitude just for that simple touch. Halfway through the set, he leaned over and whispered, "I'm really happy we're doing this." "Me too," I said, smiling. After the show, we wandered the streets under the glow of street lamps, the cool night air sharp and refreshing. Jamie stopped suddenly, pulling me close. "I've been thinking." I raised an eyebrow. "Uh-oh," he laughed nervously. "No, seriously, I want this to be more. I want us to be more than just two people figuring it out." My heart pounded in my chest. "You mean?" He nodded, eyes steady. "Yeah, I want us to be a we. I want to be the person you come home to, the one you trust." I swallowed, feeling a mix of excitement and terror. "I want that too." We kissed then, slow and sure, like promises being made without words. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. As the weeks passed, our relationship deepened. We started meeting each other's friends, sharing little rituals like Sunday morning coffee runs and late-night pizza binges. Jamie introduced me to his favorite hiking spots, and I showed him where I like to watch the sunset. One evening, he invited me over for dinner. He'd cooked spaghetti carbonara, his attempt at impressing me with his limited culinary skills. We laughed over the burnt edges and spilled sauce, the kitchen a mess but the mood light. After dinner, we settled on the couch, Jamie resting his head on my shoulder. The city lights twinkled through the window, and I felt this overwhelming sense of belonging. "Do you ever think about where this is going?" I asked quietly. Jamie looked up, a soft smile on his lips. "I try not to get too far ahead, but yeah, I think about it. Me too." He shifted closer, fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. "Whatever happens, I'm glad it's with you." Same here. Life wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt, misunderstandings, and the occasional argument, but those were the moments we grew stronger, learning how to navigate the messy, beautiful chaos of being together. One night, after a particularly long day, Jamie surprised me by showing up at my door with a takeout box and that goofy grin I couldn't resist. "Thought you might need some company," he said. I pulled him inside, grateful beyond words. We ate on the floor, surrounded by half-empty boxes and laughter, talking about everything and me too. We kissed then, and in that moment, I realized that waiting for an Uber that night, standing on that cold sidewalk, had been the beginning of something I'd never dared to hope for. And now, with Jamie by my side, I was ready to see where this journey would take us. It's funny how something as ordinary as waiting for an Uber turned into this whole unexpected chapter of my life. Standing there on that sidewalk with the city buzzing around us and the cold creeping through our jackets, I never imagined it would lead to this. Jamie, sitting across from me now, his hand warm in mine, the quiet comfort between us filling the room. There's a kind of magic in the everyday moments we shared, the late-night talks, the simple dinners, the way we learned to hold space for each other's fears without trying to fix them. It wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It was about showing up, choosing each other again and again, even when we were scared or unsure. Last weekend, we went back to that same street where it all began. The bar was closed, the sidewalk quieter, but the memories felt alive, like a thread connecting then to now. Jamie slipped his hand into mine, giving a small squeeze that said more than words ever could. "I'm glad you didn't run," he whispered. I smiled, heart full. Me neither. We talked about the future, not in some overwhelming, pressure-filled way, but with hope and a steady calm. We don't have everything figured out, and honestly, that's okay. What matters is that we're walking forward together. Looking back, I realized that kiss on that cold sidewalk wasn't just a spark. It was the start of something real, something worth the nerves and the risks. Jamie taught me that love isn't perfect or easy. It's messy and quiet and sometimes terrifying, but it's also the warmest kind of home. As I sit here now, fingers entwined with his, I feel grateful. For that night, for the courage to lean in, and for the unexpected way life can surprise you when you least expect it. Waiting for an Uber was just the beginning. And with Jamie, I'm ready for whatever comes next.